Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. I hope you guys are doing absolutely fine. Now, some of the most important questions an architecture student or a professional can ask is from the sea of softwares that we have in 2025. What should I learn and what should I focus on? And it is not just important to learn softwares to survive architecture college, but it is important to learn the main ones so you can excel in your academics, build a strong portfolio, and then eventually go towards your ideal job. So if you have certain questions like these, this video is for you. This video is going to be in 3 parts. We're going to be focusing on the foundation tools, the advanced tools, and the collaboration tools a student or a professional needs to know to be in a field like architecture. So without further wait, let's just get started. Now first, let's talk about foundation tools and how can we start this segment without talking about AutoCAD. It is the OG of digital drafting, the first software that most of you all would learn once you start architecture college or when you start working in a firm or somewhere. AutoCAD is still widely used. I know there are a lot of softwares in the market, but AutoCAD is still something that is being used by a lot of interior design and architecture firms. You're going to do everything under the sun in this software, whether it is 2D drawings as per planning, sections, elevations, detailed drawings, concept drawings, everything. I mean, my everyday work is on AutoCAD, and eventually over the years you also learn some shortcuts that makes your life easier. So learning this software, working on this software is a pretty core skill, and that should be on your resume. So that's AutoCAD, the first software which at least you should know when you're doing architecture. Now for the next foundation software, let us talk about SketchUp. Again, a household name if you are into architecture. It is a easy 3D modeling software that if you're in first year, the first thing you want to learn for making your concept sketches into 3D models or something, you could use SketchUp. And even if you're in 5th year or even if you're working in a practice, SketchUp would be that one quick software that would just make all of your ideas, all of your concept drawings become into like a 3D model so that you could sit and analyze whether this works or not before you actually move on with the detailed stuff. SketchUp is easy to learn, and I would just recommend anyone, if you're not good at it, to probably brush up your skills, whether you're in college or you're out of college. Now, whether you decide to go into interior design, stay in architecture, SketchUp really just works everywhere. Honestly, I did my thesis on SketchUp, on Rhino. It was very mixed, but basically I assembled my whole thesis on SketchUp, and I've had a habit of using it so much that I think it's an incredibly important software to know, whether whatever field in architecture you decide to be in. Now that we're talking about foundation tools like AutoCAD and SketchUp, once you have good grasping power on them, you would actually need to go further and learn a software that is actually an industry standard being used in a lot of international firms and a lot of firms just even in India if you are working. It is Revit. It is something that just does not help you make plans. It could make sections, it could make elevations, it could help you do climate analysis, it could help you do the construction drawings, just everything under the sun. This particular software can help you do that. Then honestly for me, I did not know much about its importance until I myself started working, and as a junior architect who's just started off, for me it was a little intimidating at first to know that I did not know a lot about this software when I was in college, because essentially when you're just doing your own thesis or your own designs, you have a lot of control on what you want to do. But once you get into the field, you realize what is the standard really going about, and therefore it makes Revit extremely important for architecture students and professionals to know about. Now the advantage of using Revit is really immense. Let me just give you all one example. So suppose you create a wall in Revit. Now, mind you, that wall, that line is not just a 2D element, it's also a 3D element. You can cut a section, you can check out the elevation, you can check out the material of the wall, the specific insulation of the wall also you can just check. You can also check how it interacts with the whole project in general. The thing is that each element in Revit contains so much detail that it can be honestly very intimidating to learn. And for me, I have tried a lot of tutorials online just to learn, but I found it very intimidating because I feel like you just really need that proper guidance to know how to exactly approach using a software. For learning the software, what I did was I joined the BIM Professional Course by Novatr, and it's honestly been a game changer for me. Taught by experts from ZHA, Big, Chancellor, and more, this course includes real project simulations, advanced workflows, and even learning plugins like Nscape, Rhino, and Dynamo in Revit. They also help you build a professional portfolio that is BIM ready and recruiter friendly. Today, Revit is used by more than 70% top architecture and construction firms. BIM is becoming an industry standard globally, and learning Revit can unlock careers in architecture, interior design, construction, and even real estate and urban planning. This is a skill that can truly set you apart. For me personally, it's been quite a few months since I started working on this course alongside working my full-time job. I think I started around Feb or March, and it is July when I'm shooting this video. And I think I've learned a lot of small things that I wouldn't really have thought it is important if I was just learning Revit on my own. And in general about the BIM workflows, when I work in an office, I realize that there's so little that I know, but just doing this course by Novatr gives me a good head start. Since I'm still a young professional, I might not know much about the industry. Doing the course is not just learning Revit, because Revit is just a part of BIM. BIM is actually a workflow that we use, being in the architecture, construction industry. And I've realized there is so much to learn in this, and I've been having a great time. So if you're somebody who is actually looking to upskill themselves and you want to do it with your job, or if you're still in college, you still want to look for some course that could help you upskill, I think this is just a good course to start with. So if you're interested to explore BIM even further, you could check out the link in description, go and explore Novatr and the courses that they provide. I'm personally doing the BIM course by them, and I've been having a good time. I've also shared a vlog, so if you're interested to check that out, you could check that out too. Take your decision and actually maybe explore BIM and explore the opportunities that you can have in architecture and construction by learning this new facet of design. Now, honestly, Adobe has some wonderful softwares, but the holy grail for architecture professionals and students would be Photoshop. You're starting to learn some of the first softwares, you learn Photoshop. You're making sheets, you use Photoshop. You're making graphics, you use Photoshop. You're doing post-production, you use Photoshop. You're doing literally the easiest stuff, you use Photoshop. I mean, it is just something that is so very important. You're making collage, you use Photoshop. It is the easiest, honestly, I believe. And honestly, a lot of us, when we are in school or even in junior college, if you had interest in graphic design, or just you've had those classes in your computer course or something, you would have learned Photoshop. I mean, even people who are not into design learn the software way before they join college, or they don't. And if you're even looking for masters or anything, you would like to revamp your portfolio, you would again be using Photoshop. I know Canva is great, and Canva is just a very good foundation, application, but the possibilities in Photoshop are endless. And if you're somebody who has no idea how to use this, you could start off with Canva, but then eventually, go towards using Photoshop, because that would just give you more hands-on experience. And then once you are used to using Photoshop, you should know there are some more interesting, Adobe softwares that could be used for some particular uses that I'll be talking about further. Now, honestly, if you're doing architecture, you're going to make models, you're going to make plans, but then you're going to render them. We all make those cinematic videos around the space that we are designing. It just shows our hard work, and at the end of the day, you have to know few rendering softwares to actually make it happen. So for that, you could learn Nscape or Lumion depending upon your interest. Well, Lumion is something that you could be using for more cinematic renders, and it's a pretty heavy software according to me. So a lot of the times my PC would just not be able to take it. So I would use Nscape, and I've used Nscape for most of my college experience because it's a plugin, it's fast, and a lot of the times I would make renders and people would not be able to figure out if it was Nscape or Lumion. Obviously, the Lumion fanatics can always get it, but Nscape is a great software too, and I have immense respect for Lumion too. Both are wonderful, and honestly, even in this course by Novatr that I'm currently doing, we actually learned how to use Nscape and Revit, which was also interesting. We made certain cinematic renders or something. So yeah, rendering is super important in architecture, and you could just start off with whatever rendering software you're comfortable with. But the main point. What am I saying? But the main point would be to at least know one software and just get your hand on it. If you are just starting architecture, first, second year, just starting third year, I believe knowing these softwares can be very helpful. You could start off with these softwares and then eventually build yourself. But if you're beyond third year doing your thesis or just working as a professional, I'm going to be talking about the advanced tools, the advanced softwares that you should know so that it can help you excel. So first, let's talk about the Rhino and Grasshopper. These both go hand in hand, and I have immense respect for people who are so good at Rhino. I personally started learning it in 5th year because I was trying to do some form finding and my professor insisted that I should try Rhino. Honestly, I am not a good person to talk about Rhino because I don't know a lot of it. I tried to self-teach myself, and honestly, I had a lot of fun. If I had more time, I would have definitely gone to the depth of it and tried to learn Rhino. But I do know when you are in architecture college, there are definitely some people who just love Rhino and love parametric stuff and love going into form finding, and they're going to do all those crazy models. And honestly, it's pretty inspiring. I mean, it is pretty difficult to do. And if you have an interest into parametric design or just these using these plugins like Lunchbox or Kangaroo or Grasshopper, Rhino is just something that can go so crazy. And you could also use Rhino inside Revit. I remember using that in college, but I just couldn't understand how to use it. It was so difficult for me. Well, even Novatr, for that matter, has courses in parametric design. So if you're interested to check that out too, I'll put a link in description. Honestly, for me, I've been into parametric design, especially in college, and I wish I would have explored Rhino more. So if you have time and if you have the interest, you should definitely check out the software. Now, I just talked about Photoshop, right? It is the foundation tool that you should know as an architecture professional. But there are certain Adobe tools that you can know which can help your life even more easy, like make it even more easy. I mean, if you're making certain conceptual sketches or illustrations, Adobe Illustrator is a wonderful software to know. And honestly, for me, I would just think, what is the use of using Illustrator or InDesign when I can do it all on Photoshop? But I realized that it makes a lot of difference. I mean, it was something that I learned from my peers in college, and therefore, whenever I'm just giving you all a head start, if you're not aware, whenever you're making conceptual sketches or certain small illustrations, it can be very easy if you're doing it in Illustrator. And it can be very easy to, bring all your project together, or if you're making your portfolio, to just compile it all in InDesign. Like, it just makes your life so easy. When I was completely making my portfolio on Photoshop, the files would become so heavy and I would just not be able to complete my job. My PC would crash. But when I was working on InDesign and I was trying to, club all of my portfolio work, it was just so easy. And therefore, just some softwares are made for certain things and it makes your life easier. So make sure once you know Photoshop, it's just easier to learn Illustrator and InDesign. And I believe by 3rd, 4th year, you could start learning them. And then eventually, even a lot of firms use them. So it's always helpful. Now, if you're somebody who's really into rendering, making those cinematic videos for your projects, I'm sure you've heard about DeFi Render. And if you're not, I'll tell you guys about it. This has been released in 2023, if I'm not wrong. So a lot of the time back in college, I was not aware about this software, but it's something that I've seen a lot of firms use it, especially the firm that I work in, and it makes some really wonderful realistic renders in no time. It's very easy to use and it's very intuitive, and it has a lot of presets too. Honestly, I have not used it to very detail, but I have looked through the interface and everything, and it all seems very interesting. Sometimes some softwares can just get very complicated, but this one for rendering can get very fast. Because sometimes when you're doing rendering, the issue comes is you have to wait for so long for that rendering to happen. And then if you don't like the end result, you have to do it all over again. but DeFi just makes it pretty easy. So that is something you could look forward to using if you're really into renders and just post-production stuff. Let's talk about the last segment of this video, which is collaboration tools. Honestly, I don't think I would have spoken about this if I was not working, because I don't know, I really realized that design eventually after college is more than designing, it's just managing. Like a lot of the times when you're working as a group, you design, but then after that you also have to execute it, and it's a huge part of design that we do not really understand about in college. But it isn't until you actually go into the field and start working, whether you're doing a small interior project or you're a part of a huge project, a small part of a huge project, you're still actually executing it, and that execution takes a lot of time and a lot of skills, honestly. And that is where collaboration tools come in place. Now, a lot of them you would have heard about them or would have not. But yeah, let me share with you all, with my experience, what are the collaboration tools that you can know if you're into architecture. The first tool would be Notion or Miro. Well, it depends on what your firm uses, or whether your firm even uses it or not, or whether you are an architecture student and you just want some productivity tool, or you want just some digital space where you can just put in your thoughts in a more synchronized manner. Well, Miro can be used as a digital whiteboard for, idea dumping and to just discuss workflows and, do those design brainstorming. It's also used a lot in UX. So if you eventually end up switching fields, Miro would also be seen a lot in UX design. And Notion, it's a no-brainer. I've made 2 videos on it, and I have personally been using Notion for so very long. It is just a no-brainer. You can just make so many pages dedicated to the kind of subjects you require. It can be used for your personal life, like just in general as a journal. And if you don't want to use it for that, you could, make it for your team and, make those public pages where everybody can contribute. You could have your digital data stored in a very synchronized manner, because I think something that is very important is when you have a sea of data with you, like आज ये हुआ, कल ये हुआ, you had to find this, you had to find that, and eventually you just have to store them and need to remember when what happened. So if something comes up, you're always ready. So these both tools can be very interesting to know, and there's nothing to honestly learn in these tools. You just have to use them. And even if you're in college and you feel intimidated, you could just start using the free version of them, and you would see like you actually don't need to learn anything. You just need to know how to use it. So eventually, if you go into a firm or any place that is actually using it, or someday you start something and you want to use it, it is very easy. Now, honestly, if I talk about my personal experience, we don't use Notion or Miro anything. I've just heard this from my friends, and I've also read this online that people use such tools, which is why I mentioned it. And I am a personal user of Notion, so I would just say yes, it is pretty valid for people to use it. But for the place that I work in, I would generally use notebooks, and I've used so many notebooks by now, but I make sure I record everything. So I've actually become a person now who physically records all stuff. I have actually kind of gone out of practice of digital use of note making and stuff. I've not done that yet, even though I'm like using iPad and everything. Still, I think I've gotten into maintaining notebooks and writing stuff. But I think no matter what you do, you just have to maintain a record. Now, whether you do it physically or digitally, I think that is something that you should keep in mind. It's a non-negotiable. Now, let us talk about something that might not really sound very out of the box, but it is very important. You should know how to use Excel. You don't need to know every formula in Excel. If you honestly ask me, I don't know everything, but Excel is extremely important. Now, it can happen that when you are in college, you might not use it very, very frequently, but once you start working, Excel is useful. Even when I was doing my internship, and even now when I'm working, I get my chances to use Excel, and sometimes it gets very intimidating because I don't know how to use it. But then eventually you start learning. So you don't have to sit and go through all tutorials. Honestly, it is not that important. You just need to know how to use the basics. And I think sometimes if you're making BOQs or if you're checking BOQs, it just gets very useful. Or if you have certain data entry about area calculations or something, it's easy. You just need to maybe look through certain tutorials online and it works out. Coordination is the key in design, no matter what you do. And recently, I have come across this concept of BIM 360 or Autodesk Construction Cloud. I was not aware about all of this back in college. So if you're in college, I'm giving you some bonus information if you've not heard about it yet. So, well, it is all about design, collaboration, and just keeping in check that all the stakeholders are working together. Like, it is that important in the industry. I did not know about it, and honestly, I would really like to plug in Novatr here because I was doing their course and that's where I got to know. And recently we've been studying about it. We're having a particular complete, segment where we are learning about every fraction of it. We're also learning about how Navis work comes into picture and how do we do clash detection and then do coordination in that. It all sounds very heavy, but honestly, it has been pretty interesting and it's something you should also know about. If you are just starting off or if you're in college, you could actually even just look for tutorials online or just look into what it is really about. The thing is, if you're working on certain projects where people from different parts of the world are working together, like for example, there's one consultant of yours which is from some other country, and always that manual interaction will never happen, honestly. So you have to connect in a way that your work is fast, and if there is some error, it can be deducted and it just can be solved. So I think that is where Construction Cloud by Autodesk comes in picture, and it makes it so much simpler. I am also somebody who's just learning, I'm going to be very frank, but this is a very important concept I've come across, and so I thought I'll just put it in the collaboration tools. So if you get a chance to learn about it, you can definitely do that. We have come to the end of this video. Thank you so much for watching. Honestly, I'm still somebody who's still learning. I'm still in a very beginner stage, but I've tried to cover everything I have known so far about softwares that you should honestly know. And I know it can get very intimidating, honestly, it really does. Tell me about it. But I think it's just important to start. You should just start off with something that intimidates you the most, and slowly and gradually you would realize that you actually get the hang of it. And learning softwares is pretty important because you could have a wonderful idea in mind, but if you cannot bring it to reality in softwares, could not really express it in the 2D or the 3D manner, you cannot really make the most of it. So do learn softwares as much as you can, but don't go overboard with it. And yes, if you're interested in doing the BIM course by Novatr, you could check out the link in description. It is actually something that I'm also doing, and I'm having a pretty productive time doing it. So if you're too interested, check it out. And yeah, I shall see you guys in the next video. Bye.